Good morning and welcome to a very wet Thursday morning. Yes, it's Ralph's house, and this morning, well, my day's somewhat disrupted actually because I'm expecting a parcel. It's one of those track and trace things, so I'm going to have to be at home for that. But I have got a few hours this morning, and my first port of call was going to be Toolstation. Because I don't have any pry bars, and you know it's a pain in the neck trying to get up floorboards with screwdrivers and chisels. Just not done thing, is it really? So I'm going to pick myself up a pry bar set today. And of course the thing with Toolstation, and I do love Toolstation, thumbs up to them, but everything is on a numbered system, and yeah, it's like Argos, you know, you've got to fill out your number and list out all your things, and they need your postcode and various things. And if you're not organised when you get there, there's nothing worse than having somebody at the counter in front of you that hasn't done that, and then says, well, what's that one like? And it goes on and on and on. Make your decision before you go. Write down the numbers, then when you get there, all you got to do is fill them out in a little form, go to the counter, pay for them, and leave. It makes it so much easier for everyone else. So I'm going to nip to Toolstation, and then with a bit of luck, we'll be at the house. That's Toolstation sorted out. And got a whopper of a set of pry bars. I didn't think they were going to be that big. Well, you know, made by Silverline. Review, sort of 4 out of 5. I guess if you were doing this for a living, you go for something a bit beefier than that you can probably whack with a sledgehammer. But for what I've got to do, it's going to do the job, I think, fine for getting up floorboards. Right, off to the house. Yeah, so here we are back at the house, and it is very wet. And but as well as the pry bars, I bought a couple of these as well, you know, 3-way light switches, because at some point I want to replace that one. I mean, it does work, it works all right. But I don't know how old this light switch is, and I just want to start new. And that's the thing. There is some suggestion that you should replace the wiring in your house every 30 years. That may or may not be true, but I'm sure it'll last longer than 30 years. Perhaps it's just a rule of thumb, or a way to keep all the sparkies gainfully employed, and why not? And a little bit more about electrics. I am not providing instructional videos, apart from the very, very simple stuff, simply because I do actually know what I'm doing, but what I don't want to do is give amateurs the impression that anybody can go in there and do electrics, because they cannot. And you know, certainly when I'm working on electrics, I make sure I'm not working on anything that's live. I make sure it's isolated. But everything I'm doing here, I'm replacing from scratch. A lot of the cables, well, it's red and black instead of brown and blue. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and quite often electricians have to go in and replace consumer units, you know, the actual fuse box, using the existing wiring. They just work with what they've got. But there's a lot of things that have changed over the years, and one of the things I've tried to do is keep right on top of the regulations and make sure that everything that I do here, when the electrician comes in and does his test, it's going to pass. And there are lots of things to consider. I don't know if my fuse box is in here. Yeah, let's just take this out. Right, well, I've taken the cover off this because I'll be mounting this soon. But it's made up of a series of MCBs that generally should trip if you get a fault on that circuit. And you've got a couple of RCDs as well that protect the whole thing. But the way you wire fuse boxes, because they're not perfect, you know, and if you've ever had a fuse go in a house and suddenly been plunged into darkness, you know what I mean. But the way it's done is you do a thing called redundancy. And so, for instance, you wouldn't put your upstairs and downstairs lights protected by this, because otherwise if one goes, they both go. So you'd put your upstairs lights protected by that one, and your downstairs lights protected by that one, and sort of mix and match so that, you know, if let's say your downstairs sockets went out, your light should still be working. That's the basic principle. As I say, it's not perfect, but it's good enough. You know, a lot's changed in fuse boxes. I mean, I've got a Bakelite one here, which in its day was a wonderful thing, but it did sort of work on the principle that surely you're not foolish enough to stick a metal tool in there and give yourself an electric shock. So they didn't particularly think about stuff, because you could actually get an electric shock if you took the cover off and was stupid enough to shove a screwdriver in there. But as time has gone on, electrical installations work on the principle that whoever is in the building or in the house is a complete idiot. So everything has to be covered and protected, nothing exposed. And also, as we went from Bakelite, there was a phase where we had consumer units that were cased in plastic. That was all the rage for a while, and now we've gone back to metal ones and sealing everything with a fire retardant and acrylic, you know, where the cables enter the box, that sort of stuff. So, you know, things have moved on at a pace. And whilst it's only me living here, I'm going to make sure that everything does comply for my own safety and anybody else who may be in the house. So it's all got to be top notch. So all the sockets will get replaced, because I think they're going to be at least 20 years old, all of these sockets. So it is really time just to pull everything out and start again. But as I mentioned in my last video, the way I'm doing it is I'm keeping the existing circuit live under the stairs, and running a completely new one, which will all come down this wall. A lot of that will transfer across. It'll all come down here in trunking, all be boxed in properly, and the consumer unit properly sealed, and everything should be quite safe. And as I say, I'm working with an electrician to make sure it is safe, and we'll do all the tests needed on it. But I see no reason why everything shouldn't work first time, actually. You know, apart from the fact that we've got this issue with having a power supply here that's unisolated. Well, other than the switch in the fuse box, but obviously if you want to disconnect the fuse box, everything's live unless you pull the main fuse. So that's why I've got a double poled isolator switch to go in. So in future, you could, if you wanted to, isolate the fuse box, consumer unit, completely, and that seems a wise thing to do. I'm very grateful to a couple of YouTubers, particularly John Ward. If you don't know his channel, check him out. Hello, I'm JW. Amazing voice, but I love his stuff because it's always in depth, and it covers dangerous items, of which there's many now coming in from China. You've got to be very careful when you're working with 240 volt stuff that's imported from the Far East. So he does, you know, it covers electrical work and the way lighting circuits work, that sort of stuff. Really good basic stuff, and you know, with a bit of cynicism thrown in. Likewise, CJR Electrical. He's an electrician out every day. And another one, CSR Electrical. Yeah, both guys worth watching the channel for the kind of work they do and the sort of things they encounter, particularly things like downlights, which are always fun. I'm kind of lucky in this house in that it's unoccupied. You know, if you've got to do electrical work in a house that's occupied, it is extremely difficult and inconvenient, and you've got to push around furniture and you've got to roll back carpets, and the curse for all electricians, laminated floors. Trust me, I'm having none of that in this place. It's awful stuff, particularly if you've got to get to work under the floorboards, which is another thing with electrical installations. Everything should be accessible. So I'm trying to avoid, as far as possible, using any junction boxes at all. So everything is accessible. And I bought several lengths of this stuff. This plastic conduit. It's like an oval shape and hollow. So anywhere I run a cable down a wall, I'm using conduit. Anywhere where I got a light switch, I'm using conduit. These I'm finding, because I'm having to, this is another room that's going to have a 3-way switch, hence why I bought a couple of them today. So, because this is ultimately going to be the kitchen. These 2 doors will all get filled up with, you know, cinder block, breeze block type stuff. And plastered over, so that's sealed up. I no longer want those double doors. They don't really work for me. So they'll be filled in and plastered. And this will become the kitchen. So I've already calculated the height of the sockets, and I shall carry on round here. They will be capped with proper metal capping to make sure they're covered. That way at least I can come around horizontally, which is not a way I like to work. I mean, I'd rather pay the extra for the cable, come down, go up, come down, go up, and do it that way. But I think in this instance I will use capping. It does protect the cables to a large extent if you've got a metal covering over them. So that's what I'm going to do in the kitchen. And this is the only room in the house that's going to have a proper ring circuit. You know, just because there's more load on electrics in the kitchen. Everywhere else, as far as I can see, apart from the garage, will be a radial circuit. The lounge has only got a few sockets in it. I've got like a little, well, it was the old kitchen on the back of this wall, but that'll be like a little study area, and right down the end there'll be a shower and toilet and wash basin, that sort of stuff. But I can't see me cracking into that this year. You know, my priority is to do the upstairs. That's the main thing. Sorry, I'm rambling this morning. My brother-in-law Steve, nice guy, he's coming in to help me break this up because it's just too heavy for me. You know, I'm 60 now, and you know, I don't want to hernia, I don't want to find myself on my back. When I was 30, I would probably have tackled it, strained myself in the process, but I'd have probably moved it. But I think this is just silly. It's too big a lump of concrete for one guy to move on his own, you know, unless he's built like Brutus. So plan tomorrow is to, you know, break all this up with a sledgehammer into manageable chunks, and also remove the hearth that's underneath, and then I'll just be left with this opening. And my sister is coming along with him, and she's volunteered to strip paper in the front bedroom, so whether they're willing to be on camera or not is yet to be seen, but they're going to be giving me a hand tomorrow, and I'm very, very grateful for the help, because you know, whilst I can do a certain amount on my own, it just gets a bit overwhelming at times. And you know, so I'm glad they're coming. That'll be Friday tomorrow. You know, a word about costs and expense, that kind of stuff. I can tell you, I am doing this almost on a zero budget. Not particularly out of choice. That's just the way things are at the moment. That's not to say that I won't have to throw money at things, but you know, it'd be interesting to see how far I get on very limited means. I have got paint, you know, I've got some trade mat to be able to do the rooms upstairs. Big containers though, it's got a couple of those, 2 for 26 quid at Tool Station, 13 quid a pop. Not bad, is it really? And I've got enough rollers, got some gloss rollers, that kind of stuff. And some light filler, you know, I'd do it as I go along, but if I need any spot filler, I've got a little bit in a tub there that I can use. That'll be useful. And the pry bars, which I bought this morning for getting the floorboards up. You know, if you don't use the right tools for getting up floorboards, they'll split and you'll end up having to replace floorboards. The only thing left for me to do is have a little tidy around. I've actually got the heating on today. Yes, I've actually put it on. Warm the house up for a couple of days. Not too hot, you know, just warm enough, take the chill off it. And, you know, when they come over tomorrow, at least they're not going to be absolutely freezing. Yeah, so we'll call it a day for today. I think it seems reasonable. I'll go home, wait for my parcel, and then I'll come out in the morning and we'll start work again. And perhaps we can see that fireplace broken up. So that's today over and done with. From Ralph's house, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll catch you tomorrow.